Hello, this is a video to show you how to work the sleeves onto my new cardigan design. So this is a top-down design, although it doesn't necessarily look like it. It's worked, the back's worked from the top down, the front's worked from the top down, and then it has set-in sleeves. I wanted these because they fit really nicely. And the sleeves, instead of making a sleeve and sewing it in to the armhole, we're actually grafting the sleeve cap onto the armhole, and then it joins at the underarm, and then you work in the round all the way down. So there is no sewing at all. So I'm going to show you on this armhole how to work the sleeve cap, but I've just done a little bit on the left sleeve just to show you what you're going to be doing, because I think it will be easier to visualize. So you're going to be working rows back and forth and anchoring the rows at the start and the end with slip stitches. So that's how you're going to be joining them to the armhole, and you're going to be increasing at the start and the end of the row for most of the rows until you get somewhere down here, and then you're going to stop increasing and just work back and forth, anchoring the start and the end of each row until you get to the underarm. Okay, so I'm going to show you on this sleeve here. So you're going to need 3 stitch markers, one to mark the shoulder seam and one to mark the start and end of your first row. So the first row is the trickiest one. Once you've got past that, it's really easy. So you'll get into a rhythm, and it actually works up really quickly. So for the first row, sizes extra small and 3XL and 4XL, you're going to be starting on the wrong side of the garment, and all the other sizes, that's medium, large, XL and 2XL, you're going to be starting on the right side of the garment. So to tell which is the right and the wrong side, if you find your shoulder seam, which is here, so that is row 1 of the back and that is row 1 of the front, you can see the right side of the stitches are facing you on row 1, and that means that this is the right side of the garment. When the wrong sides of the stitches in row 1 are facing you, that's the wrong side of the garment. Okay, so I'm going to be making the size small, so I need to start with the wrong side facing. So I'm actually going to work my first row across here. Okay, all the other sizes that have right side facing, you're going to be working across here. So I'm turning to my wrong side, and the pattern asks you to mark out rows either side of the shoulder seam. So to start with, we're going to put a stitch marker in the shoulder seam. Let me zoom you in a bit more. There we go. So that we can see where our central point is. So for extra small and small, you're going to place a stitch marker 6 rows to the right of the shoulder seam. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that is the end of the 6th row there, and I'm going to put a stitch marker right in that point. For sizes medium to 2XL, it's 7 rows, so you'll put your stitch marker there, and for 3XL and 4XL, it's 8 rows, so you'll put your stitch marker there. Now we're going to be working evenly across to this point here, so we're going to have an even number of rows on each side, but for our marking out purposes, we're going to mark out 1 row less on the left side. So for extra small and small, that will be 5 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So at the end of the 5th row, I'm going to place my stitch marker. For sizes medium through to 2XL, you'll place your marker there at the end of the 6th row. And for 3XL and 4XL, you'll place your stitch marker there at the end of the 7th row. Okay, that will be, the reason for that will become obvious in a moment. So I'm using Yarn Smith's Merino DK. I'm going to start a fresh ball for this sleeve, and what you're going to do is attach your yarn to the point where the right hand stitch marker is. So I'm going to attach my yarn in there. So I'm actually going to take out the stitch marker because it does make it a bit tricky, and go in there, pull my yarn through, and I'm going to tie a knot. And then I'm going to put my hook in and pull through a loop so I can start my first stitch. So for the first sleeve cap rows, we are going to be increasing at the start and the end of the row. So we're going to be working in UK trebles, US doubles. So the first thing we're going to do is to make an increase, so 2 stitches into the same spot, And we're going to be doing it at the start of the 6th row. So that's the end of the 6th row where we placed our marker. We're going to be basically spanning the length of 1 stitch and putting our increase in the start of the 6th row. Okay, so I've yarned over and I'm just going to work 2 stitches in that same spot. So that's the increase at the start of our row. Now for this size, I've got to work 20 stitches across here to just before that stitch marker there. We don't work the last stitch right in the stitch marker because into the stitch marker we're going to work our last increase. So 20 stitches I've got to span this space. That's my center shoulder seam. So if I divide 20 by 2, I need 10 stitches across there and 10 stitches across there. Okay, so for the other sizes, you'll have 24 stitches, so you'll do 12 and 12, and then 3XL and 4XL, you've got 27 stitches. So you'll have 13, one in the middle, and 13 to get your 27 stitches. Okay, so now I need to work 10 stitches across there. So this bit is a bit fiddly and annoying, but once you've done this row, it's easy going. I'm going to work 1, 2, and you can see that I'm actually digging into the stitches, trying to make sure that I've got at least 2 strands of yarn on top of my hook, not 1, so it's nice and strong. 3, 4, 5, 5. Only got 1 strand there. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I've stopped just to the right of my stitch marker. So I now need to work another 10 stitches, just reel off some more yarn, across the second half of marked out rows. So I might actually just take that stitch marker out, it's kind of in the way. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of want to go in there, dig into that one. 6, 7, 8, oops, 9, and the last one is just to the right of the stitch marker. So let's just check. I've got my increase there, and then I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 stitches. So now I'm going to work my last increase in that spot where the stitch marker is. So I'm just going to take that stitch marker out and work 2 trebles, US doubles, into that spot there. So I'm now at the end of the 5th row, and I am now going to anchor my row to the end of the 6th row with a slip stitch. So that's the 6th row there, that's where my marker was, so that's the 6th row, and I'm now going to slip stitch this row to this row. You can tell which one it is because that's a right side row and that's a right side row. So I'm literally going to join them together. So insert your hook, yarn over and pull through to anchor that row to there. So that's our first row. So we've got increase, 20 stitches, increase. Obviously different sizes have a different amount of stitches here and they will span slightly more rows, but that's what your row 1 will look like. Okay, now we're going to be ready for row 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slip stitch to the top of the next row to get the height to work my next row. Okay, so the next row, as you can see, is a row of wrong side stitches, so I need to slip stitch to the top of that row in order to get the height to work the next row. Don't work that slip stitch too tight, keep it nice and loose, because otherwise you're going to sort of squash your row down. Okay, so keep that fairly loose, and then you're going to turn your work clockwise, so turn it that way so that your yarn is behind your loop and your hook. And then we're going to work row 2. So now for this size, I've got the right side of my work facing. You can see the right side of row 1 on my shoulder seam. For sizes medium to 2XL, you'll now have your wrong side facing. Okay, so I'm now going to work an increase into that first stitch, which is the last stitch of my previous row. So work 2 stitches in there. Then you're going to work 1 stitch in each stitch across your row. So I've got 1 stitch remaining. As you can see, that's my increase there. Don't get confused between the slip stitch. So that's your last stitch. You can see the V from the increase. That's the second one along. Sometimes tricky to get under that last stitch. So you're going to work your increase in there, so 2 stitches into that last stitch, and then you're going to anchor your row. So it's really easy to see where to anchor your row, because you'll have worked a right side row and you'll have a right side row on your left, and you're just going to anchor them together. So you're going to slip stitch into the top of that right side row, and you can see that wrong side rows lead to wrong side rows and right side rows lead to right side rows, so it should all match up nicely. Now you're going to slip stitch to the top of the next row, which will be a wrong side row, so just slip stitch loosely into the top of that row, and you're going to turn your work clockwise, and you're now ready to start row 3. So increase into the first stitch, work 1 stitch in each stitch along. Oops. So each row you will increase by 2 stitches until you get to the end of the increase rows, and then you'll just be working 1 stitch in each stitch, and your stitch count will remain the same. Okay, so I'm down to my last row. Let's get all that out of the way. So I'm going to work my increase to my last row. And now I am going to anchor with a slip stitch to the top of the next right side row. So that's there, right side, right side. Pull that tight. And then I'm going to slip stitch to the top of the next wrong side row, which is here. So make sure your rows are always syncing up, and then we're going to turn clockwise, and we are ready to start row 4. So you can see that it's forming that nice little sort of cap sleeve. I'm just going to pop that in there. Okay, so you can see I'm getting a bit of a tangle because I've got 1 ball attached to each side, but you can see it's forming that nice little cap sleeve, and it's you're just working back and forth attaching to these rows, and so you should, by the time you get to the last row, you should literally link up with the last row, and you should have no rows left unless you've become out of sync somewhere. So always check that you're slip stitching to the next right side row, and then I will show you how to join the sleeve up at the bottom in the next video.